Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to a critique of The Handmaid's Tale roundtable discussion. Well, yes, this event will be in a roundtable format. So, surprise, surprise. And this event is, as always, hosted by the Center for Inquiry Canada, your community for science and secularism. My name is Olu Romano. I am a co-organizer of the CFIC Victoria branch and the branch manager of the virtual branch. I am also honored to serve as the human rights chair of our organization. CFIC is Canada's only national nonprofit with the mission of promoting and educating the public on critical thinking, science, and secularism. We work to equip people to make decisions based on evidence, rational thinking, and compassion. To that end, we hold events like this to provide an opportunity for you to engage in subject matter experts on a variety of topics. These days of physical distancing, all of our events and activities are provided online, available from coast to coast to coast. We will be recording this talk for publication on CFIC YouTube channel. You may wish to turn off your camera or rename yourself if you wish to stay anonymous. To make the background noise, I put everyone on mute. After Christine Shellska's talk, there will be a Q&A. No, actually, this will be in a roundtable format. So Christine will, I believe, make an introduction for the first 15, 20 minutes, and then we can all take it up from there and make it in a more of a Q&A format for the remainder of our time. We rely entirely on donations and memberships to allow us to bring you events such as this one. Please visit our website or email me for more information about how to become a member or make a donation. Now, I would like to introduce you to this evening's speaker, Christine Shellska. And during our talk, I'll be referring to her as Chris due to years of habit. I know Chris for a long time. In 2015, I believe that was when we first met. Stuart Beckman invited me over to Atheist Alliance International, and then Christine was the president, and we worked together for a couple of years, and then I was her successor. And and yeah, she used to run it like a tight ship. And right now, Christine is the secretary of American Humanist Association. Now, her research involves studying the rhetorical strategies employed by the Intelligent Design Creationism movement. She is the first Canadian to be elected to the board of directors of AHA. And also, as I mentioned before, past president of AAI. She is also a regular co-host on the Calgary-based Legion of Reason Diversion podcast. Christine is also a seasoned communications advisor and graphic designer, specializing in corporate communications, branding, marketing, and advertising. So tonight we will have a journey into The Handmaid's Tale. And I believe you would like to take it on from here, and then
sure. Yeah.
We can ask you the questions if that's all right.
Okay. All right. So title slide. Here's me. Thank you for introducing me. I'm also on the board of directors for the Humanist Society. So just have to mention that. So here's a bit about Margaret Atwood. I just did a brief biography. She was born here in Canada, November 18th, 1939. She's author of, like, if you don't know her name, I'm sure pretty much everybody knows who she is, I hope anyway. But she's author of over 50 works, including fiction, poetry, critical analysis, and graphic novels. She's won tons of awards. And if you look at this, whoops. Okay. Including the Humanist, American Humanist Association Award for 1987. And I actually did that poster, and it's lovely and printed on canvas, and it is in the American Humanist Association's boardroom. So just a little shout out to myself for being a graphic designer too. Yeah. So of course, The Handmaid's Tale was written in 1985. The graphic novel came out in 2019, and the TV series is based on that graphic novel. And there's a sequel that was, published in 2019 called The Testaments that I haven't read, but I bet it's really, really interesting. So I thought I'd start off by defining what literary criticism is, sometimes designated critical theory or theory, and now undergoing a transformation into cultural theory within the discipline of literary studies, can be understood as a text of concepts and intellectual assumptions on which rests the work of explaining or interpreting literary text. There's quite a few forms of literary criticism. I've listed a few here. I'm wondering if anybody is familiar with these theories, if there's anyone in particular, we'd like to discuss. Anybody?
Now, if you guys like, you can unmute yourself, but please try to mute yourself after your comment so that we only have one mic open at a time.
Actually, can I do something really quickly?
Maybe.
I'm sorry.
Yes, go ahead.
I thought we would hear from herself some of the controversies that's come about from the novel and
yeah, sure.
following media. So
some of the states in the United States have gone all the way to Gilead pretty much without the outfits. When people are scared, they tend to become willing to give up civil rights in favor of somebody telling them that everything's going to be okay. Just do what I say. So and then came the election of 2016, right in the middle of the filming of season 1 of Handmaid's Tale. Everyone woke up on the morning of November the 9th. Everyone in the show woke up and thought we're in a different show because the frame around the show, the way in which it would be viewed, had changed. And that has continued as the present American administration has become more hostile to women's rights, and various states have become more hostile. So obviously the show seemed more of a possibility. I'm not surprised because it's happened before. The younger you are, the easier it is to surprise you because you haven't seen the cycles happen before. And at the time of the election, when I was in the United States, young people were going, "This is the worst thing that has ever happened." And I was going, actually, it's not. There are worse things. There have been worse things, and there could be worse things. And the United leadership yet. There's a lot of pushback, kickback, resistance to these sorts of regimes coming in. But there is also a pretty concerted effort to undermine the Constitution, destroy the rule of law. That's pretty worrying, and destroy the free press. So those are worrying signs. It's a show. It's a television show. It's in the book, but it's more in the background of the book. So the people making the show have deep delved into the book a lot, and they have the same rule that I had for writing the book, which is you can't put anything in that hasn't already happened. So they're making visible and graphic things that are background and remembered in the book. It kind of doesn't matter whether I'm happy or not because I don't have any control over it. I had no control over the television rights. They went with the movie rights of 1989. The movie was sold to a distributor who went bankrupt. The assets were dispersed, and nobody who knew had the contract for several decades. It turned out to be MGM, much to their surprise. So it is they who have the rights. They made a deal with Hulu. None of that had anything to do with me. But I was lucky because the team that that got it is a very dedicated team. I have an excellent designer, wonderful directors, dedicated writing room. They do a lot of research, and wonderful actors, so it could have been otherwise. Well, there have been positives as well. Ireland, for instance, big success story, much exceeded their expectations. A lot of ripping off of the Band-Aids here and there around the world. I would say Argentina is very close to getting some sort of rational decision. What is disturbing me about pushbacks against women's rights? Well, some of the states in the United States have gone all the way to Gilead pretty much without the outfits. And that has nothing to do with love of little babies. If you really love little babies, you would pay for the prenatal care, the natal care, the medical bills, and the support of those women who have children. But these people are not thinking like that at all. There are lots of other examples in the world and in history. There's been a lot of baby stealing. That's certainly in the books, and one of those was in Argentina, but Hitler did it too. And there have been things that weren't quite overt, which were, you know, the big scoop of indigenous children in Australia and Canada. It happened in the United States. So this is history. And when you've had human beings doing something, you know that they're capable of that and they can do it again. And some people say, but it's so beautiful. They think a dystopia should be ugly looking. But a lot of dystopias aren't. You know, that's the thing about them. They do have this visual appeal. Hitler wanted to be an artist, and the thing that interested him the most about his own regime was designing the costumes. Isn't that weird? Yeah, he liked the showtime aspect to it. Save the oceans. So what you're breathing right now is a result of natural biological activity on the planet. And 60 to 80% of that oxygen is made by marine algae. That's why I say, top of the list, save the forest, then we can save the oceans, then we can argue about the other things.
Yeah, so there we have it, her opinion. I guess we get a little sense of, you know, her politics and her personality and wisdom. And I think she's right in saying that these things do happen. You know, one of you know, I was trying to get Yasmin Mohammed on, and she's written a book lately about her experience as a, you know, growing up here in Canada and forced to wear, you know, head coverings. And, you know, I think she's about to go into a forced marriage or something too. I haven't read her book actually, but I've heard her speak a number of times. And very patriarchal. She escaped it, and now she's a non-believer. So I think Margaret Atwood is probably an atheist, certainly a humanist if we gave her that award. Good without God, anyway. Some of the things I thought were really interesting were the characters and how they're developed as this kind of hierarchy. And it's not necessary, I mean, it's gendered, but it's not, because there are lower ranking men than the handmaid, whose perspective this is, you know, being told from. Commodity or pregnancy is commodity is another theme. I'm just not going to bother with the theory stuff unless somebody really wants me to touch on it, because I think we just have a discussion about some of the themes and stuff like that. So at any time, if you want to interrupt me or add something, just let me know. Yeah, pregnancy as a commodity, and also as protection and a certain amount of privilege afforded if you're a pregnant woman. Social value being tied to your reproductive functions, unless you're a man, because if they're sterile, it's all fine, right? Let's see. I thought it was very interesting how the costumes are kind of color coordinated. You know, for example, and it reminds me of Ford, right? You can have your car in any color as long as it's black, right? So you have to wear certain clothing according to your social strata or whatever. And
Yeah, I realized that the hats in the movie and the hats used in the TV show are different in nature.
okay, well, they're called wings. And of
Yeah.
course, they're to hide, basically women, cover them up. And of course, red is being chosen as a particular color because these are supposedly fallen women, even though they've had these perfectly normal lives before. And like Offred, who's the main character, the handmaid we're talking about, her, what do you call it? The guy who she's being a handmaid for, his wife is much like
Her commander.
yeah, his wife is much like, I don't know, Ann Coulter or one of these people that are going on about family values and shit like that, right? Yeah. And so I noticed the wives got to wear green, but they had a variety of green things, or sorry, whatever color it was. And they got to wear high heels, whereas, very utilitarian costumes for the handmaids. They had to wear a particular type of shoe. And then there's certain themes like when they go out for their walks, there's often bodies hanging to serve as an example of people that have deviated from this religion. And they stay up there till there's another fresh batch of bodies to put up. And has anybody else got any themes they'd like to add to this or talk about?
I think Eden just unmuted himself and he attempted to say something, but
Oh, sorry. Okay.
No, it's okay. It's okay. I was just jumping in because you were talking about the commander's wife. Her name is Serena Joy, and yes, before Gilead took over, they do depict her as having been a pundit and a very Christian conservative pundit who had written books and such. So the Ann Coulter, I just wanted to say the Ann Coulter comparison is apt.
Thank you. Any other comments?
Yeah, it's interesting. They changed between Steve Watson here. The change in the character of Serena Joy between the book and the TV series. In the book, as I recall, it's been like 30 years since I read it, but the couple were, the Waterfords had been an televangelist couple, I think loosely modeled on Jim and Tammy Faye Baker, because she talks about Serena Joy having jumped up and down and had runny makeup because she's trying. And yeah, that's very different character, but very much modified to fit, to be more relevant to the times, I think. Because yeah, the Ann Coulter, Phyllis Schlafly image is really much more pertinent now, and made it much more powerful that way. Nobody really cares about Tammy Faye Baker.
Well, she's dead.
Yeah, well, I mean, nobody cares about that kind of, televangelist life anymore.
What's the guy, Baker, Jim Baker? He's still around and he's selling crap on the internet, like end times type food. And it's hilarious. Yeah. Tom, hi.
Yeah, one comment I was going to make was, you said the handmaids wear red because they're fallen women. I kind of connected it with red as a universal sign of fertility in different cultures. So I thought they're the fertile, they're the breeders, they're the ones who have to do all that stuff. And I thought that might be why they're that color. I didn't know that there was something about being fallen women.
Well, I think it pertains to the Scarlet Letter. I think there's a literary allusion there.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I think it's, these, even though, the main character was happily married and, people have had these normal lives, suddenly they're fallen women and they're shunned by the wives of these, commanders and stuff like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just because of their reproductive capability. So, yeah, like I said, they're a commodity.
Yes, definitely.
Hi, this is Nurul.
Yes, it's your turn anyway.
Sorry,
Please
I
go
was
ahead.
raising my hand. I was waiting for my turn.
Yes,
I was not.
yes, thank you.
This is my first time here. Sorry, I apologize for not following the protocol. I don't know if there is a protocol, but
Oh no, actually, you were the only one raising hand. Go ahead, please.
no, because I didn't turn on my camera, so I just wanted to make sure that you recognize that I raised my hand. Okay, anyways, I don't want to create a diversion here because you guys are discussing about some TV series and the book, but I just wanted to respond to that first comment that you made, Christine, about Yasmin Muhammad giving up the religion because she was forced into marriage and she was forced to wear hijab. As far as I'm a Muslim, by the way, and from an Islamic point of view, there is no forcefulness allowed in the religion of Islam. So if somebody does not want to wear a hijab, nobody can enforce it. If she does not want to get married to somebody, nobody can enforce that also. Because as the Quran,
I am sorry. I think you're spewing a bunch of nonsense, to be with all due respect. You know that there are places in this world where women do not have that choice. You know
Yeah.
that. You know
Okay.
that. We all know that.
But it's not coming from the scripture though.
Well, it's certainly coming from somewhere.
Yeah, so it's cultural. So I'm just clarifying that something
Well,
to do with
culture
the
includes religion.
no,
you
it
know?
does not. We have to
So
separate what
Why?
Muslims
Why do we have to separate that? We don't have to separate culinary culture from, culture. Religion informs culture and vice versa.
So there is a difference in terms of like what Islam says and what Muslims do. So we have to understand that it doesn't come from hadith as well. You have to show me the hadith where it's forced
Okay, I
upon
think
them.
that's a topic for another discussion. But
Maybe, yeah.
yeah, if you want, we can have another talk just about that. And actually, I would like to invite another friend, Apostate Prophet, if you would like to argue and insist on your stand. But well, why don't we just get back on course? Please carry on, Noura, about your comment.
Yeah. So yeah, if you want to like, I would like to conclude and then maybe you can respond. I mean, the thing is, you have to, what I was saying was, you have to separate what Islam says and what Muslims do. Whatever Muslims do does not mean that is exactly what Islam says. You have to get me the proof from the Quran and the teachings of the Prophet that this the forcing of hijab and forcing of marriage was something that comes from the religion, because in the Holy Quran, chapter number 2, verse number 256 clearly says that there is no compulsion in the religion.
Well, sometimes people are better. Well, often people are better than their religions, right? Like I think about Catholics versus the institution of the Catholic Church, and a lot of Catholics, why they're not running away in droves, although they are, is beyond me after the scandals that have been, happening over the, I don't know, internationally, systemically institutionalized over decades, if not, millennia, really. So yeah, I think people can act in good. It's about cherry picking the religion. If you want to pick the nice, parts of your religion and live up to that, and that's all good. Like I'm on your side there, but
Yeah.
I think what you're saying isn't true in other parts of the world. Yeah.
Yeah, I just wanted to just add a thing there. I think what Owner said was really true here, is that this is a different discussion. The discussion that we're having here about the Handmaid's Tale, it doesn't really matter at all what's in the Quran or what's in the Hadith. It's what's the behaviors that we're seeing and what we're talking about. It's the result. It's the end result. So we're talking about the way that people are behaving based on what they believe. So for this discussion, that's sort of where it peters off. Whether this stuff is specifically argued for in the Quran and stuff like that, that's an interesting discussion, but it's for a different time, I think.
Although, to be fair, I think the point, we're talking about fundamentalist religions too. So I think any religion that has a fundamentalist aspect could probably be under, critical scrutiny in the context of this text. But I appreciate what you're saying, and we'll move on to another something else here. Does anybody have anything else to add to this?
Yes, everybody, the chat is off right now because I am trying to encourage everybody to unmute their mics and make their comments that way, so we can turn this into a roundtable discussion format. So let's see if we have any other friends raising hands or any other questions? If
Tom.
not, we can.
Yeah, I
continue.
was just going to make a comment. From early on, I had seen the early, I hadn't actually read the book, but I had seen the original version of the movie and then the series, and been following up on reading other analysis of Handmaid's Tale, which is to me fascinating. But I was surprised at the part where they revealed in the first or second season that Serena and her husband, that Serena really invented Gilead and the whole religion. As a woman, she oppressed the other women and categorized them to serve men and got swept up in that. And I was kind of confused about anybody who has more knowledge about what I'm talking about there, that Serena was critical to, like, it was her concept, and she was on speaking tours in universities and getting challenged by students, and then somehow their ideology took over and became the rule of law, and created that new world, dystopian world. And to the point that she lost control, where she would lose a finger for reading, when in fact she had written the religion. So
Yeah.
that to me was mind-boggling.
Well, yeah, I mean, another aspect is women aren't allowed to be educated. They're not allowed to, I guess, control money or anything like that, generally speaking.
So was that the men
Yeah.
who corrupted her vision, or that was part of her vision?
I guess just because you're a woman doesn't necessarily mean you're a feminist and you're gonna, stand up for the rights of other women. And what do you say? You see this in, certain Republican kind of areas.
Yeah.
Stay home, be barefoot and pregnant, go to church, blah, blah, blah. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. This, I think this is kind of paradigmatic of that kind of
I hope they go more.
control.
I hope they go into more of that in the next season, because it looks like, I guess everybody should assume, spoiler alerts, right?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say. Yeah.
Should we assume that?
Well, I think, okay, yeah, spoiler alerts. We can talk about it. I was thinking don't do that, but yeah.
Okay, well,
Yeah.
I'll
Kind
keep
of hard to
quiet
talk about
anyway.
without. No.
But I hope in the
Carry
next,
on. Yeah.
apparently they get another season, so hopefully they go into more about Serena's backstory now.
Yeah. Oh, and I had another thought, like Canada is perceived as this oasis to go to, which is, I thought it was kind of strange. What do you guys have opinions? What's your opinion on that? Do you think that's a little utopian almost?
I think it was part of, because of Margaret Atwood's, she was born in Ottawa, so I think it's from that perspective as a woman and born in Ottawa that maybe and that we're the next door neighbor that's always been the nice, gentle neighbor, that's a safe place to go, versus other places that speak other countries, i.e. Mexico. Or that
Yeah,
speak
well,
other
there's certainly a lot of places that
languages.
would,
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I just find the treatment a little bit, I mean, she's, said as much that, obviously we have issues here in Canada too, but I think it's a little, yeah, a little idealistic to,
Yes.
yeah.
We have
Right,
Steve and Rick on queue, but I believe Steve lowered his hand. Rick, why don't you go ahead?
Yes, you mentioned that in the write-up to this event, you mentioned that there are a number of places in Canada that have this sort of thinking. I wonder if you could expand on that. I would assume that Bountiful is one of those places.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, does everybody know what Bountiful is? It's basically a colony, I suppose, in BC of what are they? Latter-day Saints, Mormons, right?
Yeah.
But they're pretty, they believe in, polygamy, things like that. They were in trouble because they were smuggling young girls back and forth to Utah, right? And underage girls and marrying them off to these older men. And yeah, that's creepy. There's lots of stuff like that going on in, all different religions right here under our noses that we just, kind of take for granted.
But I think
what
that, oops, sorry.
Oh, well, okay, I think another thing
What
too
other
is,
communities besides Bountiful can you think of?
well, I'm not exactly, I don't know, religious communities that are a little more, like I said, I'd probably rather have Yasmin talk about this than me, because she can speak to it from a more personal level, but I've heard stories about, you know, girls that are afraid to not wear their head covering around their family, and they're afraid to admit they're dating somebody, or that they're, you know, having questions about the religion. Um, that goes, you know, across the board for, I don't know, I met one young woman who, she was forced to go to these pro-life kind of protests, and she didn't believe it. And by this time, you know, I guess maybe first year university, and she depended on her family to support her through her education. So she couldn't really say anything, right? And she just, like, she was so humiliated going to these things. And, you know, got to toe the line, I guess, you know, to not get shunned by your family.
A
So,
couple news stories just from the last couple of days in Cape Breton. There was a church that told a couple who had been trying for years, spent $40,000 to have a baby, and finally had one from in vitro fertilization, that that such children are immoral, that the parents are immoral, because it interferes with God's the sacrament of God creating life. In a separate story, again, this is just in the last couple of days, a church that was identified as being a hotspot for COVID-19, leading to hundreds of infections and half a dozen or so traceable deaths. The pastor says that this is lamentable, but it's God's will, and that the state has no place in restrictions. So this is Canada in the last couple of days. So it's these types of stories are current,
mhm.
and they're here.
Yeah, and there's been honor killings here and in the US. You know, this stuff happens here.
Yeah. I mean, reading these stories makes me rededicate my efforts to be a secular activist in this
That's
nation.
good. Well, I was thinking, yeah, in terms of, you know, women's rights to bodily autonomy and right to access safe abortion, which is often a medical necessity. And, you know, having that taken away is kind of a frightening thought, really, you know.
Yeah, it's unbelievable that, you know, at this age, we are still, you know, the America's number one news
Yeah.
stories is about the, you know, abortion legislations these days, and it's 2021. Unbelievable. And
Well,
by the way, you mentioned Yasmin Mohammed, and I would like to pass the message. I would like to give her regrets. She
yeah.
was not able to attend to this meeting as a co-host because she has relocated to Italy, and it's a completely different time zone. It's a, you know, like middle of very inconvenient time for her. So we couldn't make it happen, but hopefully in the future talks, we will have Yasmin again on different topics. So, sorry, Leslie is raising his hand, and then you can continue if that's all right.
Well, one of the things I wanted to mention about the TV show was what I found was fascinating. It was the power dynamics within the household. So it was clear that the commander, from a societal perspective, was invested with authority and power and decision making, but within that household, both of the major women, Offred and Serena, were smarter than him, and he kind of depended on them. So she had to deliberately hold back when playing Scrabble. So Offred needed to hold back when playing Scrabble with the commander in order to not show him up, but still be intriguing enough that she would be able to influence him in certain ways. And Serena was really shown to be the planner. And this we talked about this a few minutes ago, where a lot of the structure of Gilead was due to her planning, her vision, her laying out how things would work. And then again, and this is a very common theme in literature, the danger with creating monsters is that you will lose control of them. They will come back to bite you. And Serena became subject to the very rules that she thought would apply to others. And yet the commander, a lot of his authority with the other men depends on Serena's knowledge and education and brilliance, but she's no longer allowed to shine. So just watching that power dynamic unfold within the series, it was implicit in the book, but not quite laid out the way it was in the series. And I thought that was one of the best changes from the books that I really enjoyed play out over the course of, I mean, particularly in the first season.
Yeah, Offred is in her previous life an editor, and so Serena is, you know, in certain episodes or whatever, she's starting to write basically legislation while her husband, you know, commander's in the hospital, and she's not supposed to be able to read. Neither is Offred, and so there's this subversive, I don't know, partnership among enemies, I suppose. I don't know what I'd say about that, but you know, a unification of I don't know, politics makes strange bedfellows or whatever, right? Any other questions? Or
I was going to make a reference to the earlier comment about Bountiful being other religions that we have that are closed societies, and that they exchange girls from other colonies and things. That to me would be comparable to Hutterite colonies that we have here, and Amish people in Pennsylvania, that they need to get other, they need to mix people from different colonies just to spread the gene pool, because it gets too incested when it's the closed community and just that little group of genes mixing up there. So they're constantly trying to bring in somebody from somewhere else. And I just wonder, again, in Handmaid's Tale, I think that sort of reflects all of those. It's talking about Muslim and Christian and, you know, all this Pennsylvania Dutch or whatever. It's Christianity. And how do you, the only way to keep this thing going is to bring in new blood all the time. And
yeah, keep
so,
asses in seats.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Rick has his hands raised. If you like to join in, Rick.
Yes, there's one thing that I thought was particularly brilliant in the series, and that was how they made the women complicit in lovemaking. It's quite brilliant that being part of the sex act that actually conceives the child, and she does it willingly, is really quite a bit of an eye opener. And I suppose I can well see that happening in any religion that goes to those extents with respect to sex. I think a lot of religions are created with the idea that the founder of the religion is going to have a lot of fun with young girls. I think Joseph Smith was one of them.
Yeah.
Anyway, any comments on that?
Not really. I think you're pretty accurate there. Yeah. I was gonna say, like in the case of Bountiful, I think the reason they kind of got busted was because they were actually, you know, transporting underage girls. But I also think that they kind of don't want to touch the issue of polygamy because, you know, it's possible that it could be polygamy among consenting adults where people aren't being exploited and children aren't being exploited and that kind of thing, right? So I don't think we really want to, as an area of law, touch that so much. So I think that's kind of interesting too.
One thing that opened my eyes to is in like the Mormon religion, which is based on Christianity and their own version of it. And they've got their closed society and their weird rules, to say the least. But I've been following a lot of true crime stuff recently, and it seems to me that a lot of big cases involve Mormon religions, and the actual Mormon church. I can't remember what the higher ups in the Latter-day Saints, how they try to distinguish themselves as different, saying everybody else is not actually Mormon. We're kicking them out. They're sort of a spin-off. They made up their own thing. They make up their own rules. They're not actually LDS, Latter-day Saints. And but in the course of following the trials, a lot is revealed about the inner workings of the Mormon society, and that involved things like they have age groups. It's more age appropriate with people being in the teens, but when it comes to sexuality, that's like a dominant thing. They have their really tight, restrictive rules on how to keep everybody in control. But then within those rules, of course, everybody is lusting after each other and finding ways to break the rules, and they have their way, their established things that are quietly said under the table, how to get around having sex like everybody else, but still being faithful to their religion. And I don't know, so somehow something tweaked, I guess, talking about sex with the handmaids being laid down with the aunt. No, what do they call it? What's Serena? He's the commander and she's the
wife who is infertile, I guess.
Yeah, the wife. Yeah. So just having the two of them having to be there, and the fact that if in many cases they have a guy who is impotent, he will, sort of bend the rules by having the girl sleep with the driver or sleep with another.
The doctor offered, right?
The doctor.
Yeah. It would probably, Serena was probably capable of, getting pregnant.
As it turns out.
And it's interesting.
Yeah. And as Margaret Atwood did say too, nothing happens in the storyline that doesn't happen in real life. And that's bone chilling just to think of all that stuff.
I have a question actually. So anybody who's part of the Western culture, I mean, I'm an American, and by the law I abide by the rules of the Constitution that we can have only one wife. You guys are talking about polygamy. I just had a question. I was curious. The Constitution itself, does not have any kind of restriction in terms of how many girlfriends do you have. Any man can go out there and have as many women that he wants to. Prostitution is legal in some parts of the US, and there are I'm just wanted to understand what percentage of people do polygamy versus what percentage of people have extramarital affair, and not to mention about the polyamorous relationships that are happening nowadays, where women and men are allowed to choose, and then they can have multiple partners within their boundaries. So you guys are okay with all of that, and then you're just pointing out polygamy as an issue here? And what is the percentage? I just want to understand that.
I don't know the percentage, and I suspect that we probably wouldn't get accurate numbers because, a lot of it, I don't know. First of all, is the question being asked in polls, and second of all, how truthful are people? What's your sample size? That kind of thing. So I don't really know that we get statistics on it, but it's obviously something that's talked about. So I don't know. Mind your own business. If consenting adults are doing whatever they want to do in their own privacy of their bed, privacy of their own bedrooms, that's just what we do here in Canada. Mind your own bloody business. Nobody's, consenting adults is a key.
Right. Same thing could be said about the polygamy as well.
Why? If people are okay, so yeah, I understand what you're saying about women being indoctrinated into religion, and polygamy is maybe not exactly part of their consent because they've been essentially brainwashed. But if consenting adults want to do that, then
I think the focus of the question is the distinction between the polyamory and polygamy. So one may be regarded more in a secular humanist sense through that
Yeah,
lens.
I guess so.
You
Okay.
know, because it's like, you know, open relationship formats. But then again, there's also those folks who wish to practice it in a closed relationship format. So, you know, it goes both ways. And yeah, so polygamy is mostly heavily is amongst religious circles. But I also do not think that, I also think that polygamy and polyamory is parallel in a sense, minus the underage marriage, minus the misogynistic, you know, dynamics, but more or less around the same values.
Well, there could be
That's a
instances
fair critique, I think.
what I'm saying is that there could be instances where it's not triggered by the religion, where women, you know, by their own choice, they want to go into polygamy. You know, you seem to like consider everybody in the spectrum as brainwashed, which is what I'm trying to understand. Is,
Oh, no,
why is that so?
No, I was saying that if you willingly go into that kind of a relationship of your own free will, that's fine. But there's a problem when you know, are indoctrinated, and there's nothing we can do about that, because if you're still a consenting adult, what do they call that? Oh, there's a word for it, where basically
Consenting
people
adult?
don't understand their own oppression. Well, yeah, people that just don't understand that they're actually being oppressed because they've been indoctrinated, like I said, right? That's not true of everybody that's in those kinds of relationships. I don't mean that by any stretch of the imagination. And I guess another thing that would affect the statistics too is, you know, marriage is a legal thing, right? So those statistics, and, you know, that would be available, but, you know, I think there's relationships that are going on quietly, and nobody's damn business as far as I'm concerned, you know.
Rick is raising his hand. The floor is yours, Rick.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on the polygamy and sleeping outside of wedlock. And polygamy is a legal thing in Canada and in the US, and I'm sure in most Western countries. And the idea of actually being married to another person while you're married to more than one person actually is illegal in this country and in most Western countries. The idea, now that's one of the things I dislike about the existence of Bountiful, for instance, because the law isn't being enforced in Bountiful. And I have a problem with marriages happening in mosques in Canada, because that in fact is illegal, and yet the imams are actually performing an illegal act. And of course, their justification is, well, it's okay in our religion, so I'm going to do it. And that is absolutely not.
I'm sorry, you're cutting off.
Okay,
I just
in a society. It's absolutely not okay in a society.
so
At any rate, I just wanted to say that, and I if you sleep with multiple women, those women aren't necessarily prostitutes. And I heard you say something to that effect, that some women that sleep around are prostitutes. You know, that's
No, that's how they're being depicted
that's
in the show, right?
no, I'm not saying that you said it.
Okay.
I'm just saying that prostitution is a profession, and if a woman sleeps around and she's not that in that profession, she's not a prostitute. She's just a woman who sleeps around, and I think that's a distinction that needs to be made.
Yeah, I don't have a problem with that. Yeah.
I have a
I just
question.
want to answer.
Oh,
Sorry, I just want to just respond for 30 seconds. So I don't know about the Canada, but I just want to mention about America. You know, in America, Muslim marriages, first of all, the registration of the marriage happens between the male and the female, and then after that, the nikah happens in the masjid, which is the mosque. So I don't have any mosque. I have not come across any mosque in the America which has been like listed as it has done something illegal. First, obviously the first they register it and then they do that second part, which is just a Islamic kind of a ritual. Why is there a problem with that?
Well, if they're not, picking on underage girls, then I guess there's not, but, yeah. Are you asking if we should look at that as a, I don't know, a piece of law that we should change, or?
No, I'm just saying that he mentioned that in Canada it's illegal, but I'm saying that I believe we follow the same process in America. I don't think it's illegal here. Nowhere it's mentioned it's illegal. No, not any mosque was given a ticket that they have performed any illegal act. Now, in terms of having underage women getting married, I just want to point out something is that a law within one country may be different and law between another country might be different. Same applies between states as well. So for example, in India, the age for marriage for men and women both is 21, while commonly in America, it's 18. So according to Indian standard of the law, the people married in America is actually having child marriages right now. So, it depends how you see that. It depends on how you perceive it. And similarly to that, there are some states who actually have, girls' marriage at 16. And now you're more than welcome to change that, but that still is the law of the land, and it's acceptable. I don't have any complaints, but I guess some people have that.
So where do we draw the line?
Yeah, I was just gonna say,
Yeah.
like, okay, so it's 21, and then then it's 18, and then so it's 16, and okay. But there's a point where this is not cool anymore.
What is the point?
For sure. Yeah, like I think here in Alberta, it's 16, but if you're 14 and within 2 years of each other kind of thing, that's kind of okay. Like, I don't know, age appropriate, whatever, right? This is Alberta. So
What have we seen in Afghanistan since the American forces have left, and families are desperately poor, and they sell their 4-year-old child to a 60-year-old man for marriage, and so that they have to get that exchange of money and food and stuff. So is that the promise of marriage when they're 16, when they sell their child to another, like an old man, comparatively speaking, old man in Afghanistan versus, it's because I've seen the recent news reports where they're selling small children, anywhere from 4 to 8 years old, well below 18 or 20.
yeah, that's
Arranged
yeah.
marriage, right? Is
Well,
it that they can possess the child until a certain age when they can marry them, or like what
I was just
happens?
going to say, like the Declaration of Human Rights, that is not, humans are not commodities, right? And if we started paying a little more attention to these sorts of, I guess, consensus among morality, which is often a difficult thing to navigate, but we don't rape babies. I mean, you know what I mean? I don't know, maybe that line isn't hard and fast, but there is a definite line, and yeah.
And the other
So-
question was about polygamy. Is it all men who get to marry multiple women, or are there examples of women who have multiple husbands?
Yeah, there are.
Not
yeah.
in religious polygamy. I don't think in religious
okay.
polygamy, polyandry, which is woman marrying multiple men. I don't know any religion, maybe some tribal religions of small tribes in Africa or other places. I don't know, but no major religion has polyandry, which is one woman marrying multiple men. But it goes the other way around, polygyny, which is one man marrying multiple women. So I think that's when you look at it from religious lens, that's where polygamy takes you to.
I do know one religion where, historically, according to the scriptures, there was polyandry practiced, but it's not generally practiced nowadays. It's in Hinduism, there is a narration called Mahabharata, where we have Draupadi, who's the wife of Pandavas, who has 5 husbands, and she actually had children with all of them. That's one reference there, but it's not generally practiced by the Hindus. I'm just mentioning that it was historically present as part of the religion itself. Now, yes, according to Islamic point of view, the polygamy is there, and it's only for men, not for women. There is no polyandry in Islam. I can only speak from Islamic point of view.
And it's not about, couples marrying couples, man marrying woman marrying multiple men. I think the discussion here is drawing the line at a certain age. And I think it was you who mentioned that the law of land. So if you go by law of land, that age drops down to 6s, 5s, 4s. So that's for us considered sick. So, that's exactly I believe, problem, because then what happens is that you start buying people. The society, the elder man, rich man starts buying young girls. And that's, what it leads to. And that's how most, I believe, cults are born, in a sense. So are we getting really away from the
I was gonna say
Well, it's a fun conversation. I like the way that just kind of flowed into these interesting topics. And I was going to add, okay, so marriage is now considered a romantic thing, but you fall in love with somebody, you marry them, kind of thing. But that's not been the case throughout a lot of history, right? So in some senses, like polygamy was beneficial because, for example, if your husband died, your brother or his brother would marry you and take you into the family because, of course, you were property and you could own your own stuff, right? So, or, in the case of a lot of times it was to do with, converging power, political power and stuff like that. So this idea of, marriage being a romantic thing is kind of new in a way,
Well, Christina, on that point, there's one thing about marriages, weddings, that it is very interesting, especially given the topic tonight. And everybody finds it to be a lovely tradition, and it's the father walking the bride down the aisle, and we call it the father giving away the bride.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay, well, I don't think it's that complicated to figure out where this comes from.
Yeah.
Dad owns the daughter, and the daughter does what dad says until a suitable male suitor comes along, and I don't know what the transaction is, but then the dad gives away the bride, gives away the daughter. You get to have this. Yeah. Proper.
Well, I mean, from a secular perspective, it's nice to have your father walk you down the aisle or whatever kind of thing, right? But this makes me think of what are those pledges or whatever, where the father and daughter, I don't know, pledge that she's going to be a virgin until blah blah blah. I mean, that's if it's inviting your family to participate, you want to ask your dad to walk you down the aisle. That's perfectly fine. But these pledges of virginity are really messed up.
I think there might be somebody in the waiting room.
I don't see anybody in the waiting room. If the other co-hosts see anybody, please help me let them in. And Rick is raising his hand. Hello, Rick.
Yes, getting back to the book and the TV series.
Thank you.
Sorry. It's fascinating, though. Yeah.
I think that Margaret Atwood is really making a strong comment on how religion can actually destroy societies. Mm-hmm. And I've heard various speakers speak about how dangerous religion is, and I think all religions are dangerous because they essentially are organizations that think they know what the truth is and what you should do with your life. And I don't think that religions are well placed to in fact do that. Why would you give yourself over to a first century or a 7th century book that is proposed to be a perfect book, when in fact that we know these things were written by mere men, mostly men. I don't think any women were writing it in that period of time. And this was made up by men to control other men and other women. So I think it's a warning by Margaret Atwood saying that beware of religions.
Yeah, and here's the hitch. Religion
I
poisons
know that
everything.
I know that the evangelicals in the States really want to create a theocratic country, and they want to get rid of anybody who doesn't believe in God the way they do, and that's a really dangerous concept.
Well, yeah, two things that come to mind from the series is kind of the complacency. It sounds like people just went along, and suddenly it was them, and nobody was there to defend them, whatever that statement is, right? And we were talking about how the handmaids and the wives would participate in this ritual where they're holding hands and all that kind of stuff. And there's one scene where the guys were sitting around talking, well, I don't think our wives are going to buy that one. Well, include them. Making the religion, up as they go along, kind of thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to make a couple of comments here, and you can disagree with me, no problem. So the first thing is that a religion is a belief system, and having no religion is also a belief system. You believe in something based on some evidence, right? So you cannot just say that the problem is religion. It could be just that problem with the human beings itself. You have to differentiate that. And second thing I want to mention is that we have been living on this planet for thousands and thousands of years. What have we solved so far, being in this whole world? The rapes are still happening, the wars are still happening, people are killing each other unjustly, still happening, everything is still happening. You will end up changing the laws, making amendments after amendments, but the solution human beings have not found solution to the common problems that they have living in this world for so long.
I think you're wrong. I
Yeah,
think
I
you're
did-
wrong,
yeah,
sir.
okay.
No,
So,
if you
so,
see
so,
historically,
hold on. You had your chance. Let her respond. So our understanding of the universe, of the world we live in, the planet, our galaxy, the universe, has increased phenomenally. And as you have said, we have lived on this planet for thousands, tens of thousands, depending on how you define the human species, perhaps a couple 100,000 years. And we have not solved all of our problems in an absolute sense. There are still wars, there are still murders. However, our understanding of the world has increased. The level of violence has decreased. I strongly recommend that you read either Steven Pinker's Better Angels of Our Nature or Enlightenment Now to get a sense of the astonishing decrease in the levels of violence over the course of the centuries. Our levels of education and literacy have increased, our lifespans have increased, our health spans have increased, like the number of years that we are healthy. So we have tried a lot of different things. And by being open to knowledge, by being open to new facts, being open to learn, being open to science, we are able to address a lot of these problems. We have human wealth, although there is still poverty and there is still people starving. The number of people, both in terms of the absolute number and the percentages, is smaller now than it ever has been in human history. So have we solved the problems? No. Have we made progress? Absolutely. And how do we make progress? By being open to learning, by being open to experimentation, by taking what works and applying that to more domains, and then repeating that process. Oh, we tried this in a new domain. It didn't work quite as well. Okay, what would? Well, the way we do that is we take what we do know, we extrapolate, and then we measure and we try again. We have made tremendous progress. The problems arise is when you close the book of knowledge, when you say, we have one system, we have one set of knowledge that has all the answers. We don't need to learn anymore. Once you adopt that mindset, then we do stop progress. And when people try to progress, then we resort to violence to say, no, it is only our sacred scroll. It is only this set of knowledge that is permissible. And that knowledge, that investigation, that way of living is intolerable. And we will punish you up to and including killing you for doing that. And you see that, yes, in Islamic societies, yes, in Christian societies, when you get a religion that gets into political power, that turns to violence when there are people from other faiths, other worldviews, other perspectives that try to live peaceably.
Amen.
Leslie, Leslie, I think that was,
Amen, brother.
So the religion does
Raw
not.
man.
I think that was brilliant. That was brilliant. And the only thing that I wanted to add to that was, it was stated earlier, just a little bit earlier before you spoke, that that atheism is also a belief system, and that's just not true. The word atheist describes a lack of a certain type of belief system. An atheist can have a belief system. They can have an ideology. An atheist can be a socialist or a communist or something like this, or a capitalist or an anything.
Humanist.
Or
right?
a humanist, of course,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
Humanist, yes, absolutely. An atheist can be that. But the term atheist describes the lack of an ideology that has to do with higher powers and gods and such.
So when
Yeah,
you
but the
call
pro-
atheism a belief system, it's more or less like, calling being bald hair color.
A hair color. That's right.
Yeah,
That's
I don't.
right.
Yeah, yeah.
Standing
Speaking from
still,
experience.
standing still is a form of dance. Same
But
thing.
you use as a science as the yardstick to develop that. Okay, so let me give an example. So how do atheists define morality? Just to curiosity. Let's say, for example, there are two consenting adults, and they would like to have sexual relationships between them without having a child. I want to underline that, without having a child. The only problem here is that they are mother and son, or a daughter or a father, or brother and sister. How does atheism define that?
I think there's a lot
Morality.
of great, I have to say there's been cases where some doctor in, I don't know, New York or whatever, who's supposed to, give women in vitro fertilization, has used his own, and so people ended up being siblings and finding out years later after they'd fallen in love or even been married and shit like that, right? So there's a lot of gray area there. I wouldn't, I think for the most part, genetics abhors that kind of, thing, right? But in the case of brothers and sisters who happen to find out after the fact that that's what they are, I don't know what to comment on that, right? Yeah.
Well, I have a comment actually on that, and that is atheism does not define that at all. Atheism has nothing to do with sex, and especially with religion. Atheism is just a lack of belief in a good book. I don't know why
I understand, Rick, but my question is basically, now let's imagine that the whole world becomes atheist. All right.
Yes.
That
Wow,
aspect.
that would be fantastic.
All right. Just a hypothetical situation. Then the rules will be defined by atheists, and that aspect of morality will be gone.
No,
I don't think,
no.
maybe by
Morality,
secular
no.
people, right? We probably want to advocate secularism, but I don't know how you'd advocate atheism. Like, how would you do that, right?
Morality is not the purview of religion. That is absolutely and utterly false. I'm an atheist, and I have yet to rape anybody. I have yet to murder anybody. I have many friends, and I love them, and that is the typical argument that the religious person will give you. If there is no religion, then people will go out and rape and murder and pillage and kill. There are atheists who are criminals. There are atheists who go out and do that. But I'll tell you one thing: there are a lot of religious people who are criminals as well. So atheism doesn't protect you.
Yeah, and if you get a free pass,
it just protects you from believing the nonsense that all of the religious believe. That's all it does.
But you have the tendency to approve something which, which is not morally correct,
Such as?
such as incest relationship.
No, I don't approve.
Nobody approved it. Nobody approved of it.
No, no.
And on what basis, on what
one-
scientific basis?
I think this
Okay,
thought
there
comes
is-
from.
So there's a
Sorry.
very simple answer for why someone with a secular, non-believing perspective, a scientific perspective, would approve of a taboo between on incest, and that is because that children that are born out of an incestuous relationship have a much higher chance of having all sorts of debilitating genetic disorders. And so to enforce that, to prevent that sort of child from coming into the world that never has a chance, or has a very high chance of having a debilitating genetic disorder or a fatal one, you establish a societal taboo against close relations, out to, maybe first cousins, maybe not quite that far from mating. Now, you could argue, and I believe you did in your initial perspective, that that doesn't apply if it's simply a sexual relationship that does not involve procreation, and you'd be right. But then you are eliding the purpose of a taboo. The purpose of a taboo is just to prevent something from happening by making it, at least societally speaking, unthinkable. Is it too strong from a scientific perspective? Yes, because the reason for that taboo is the offspring that might result. So if you want to argue that that taboo is too strong and overreaches, okay, you'd be right. But the fundamental reason from a secular, or as you keep saying it, from an atheistic perspective, still has a very solid grounding in our knowledge of our bodies, of our genes, and how they work together.
That's what I meant when I said nature kind of abhors, these kinds of relationships. That's what I was kind of trying to describe in a nutshell, right? Typically,
most religious philosophers argue that, so if you use a condom, then does it make it all right? Because, where do you take your ethical values? Because Muslims take their ethics from Quran, Christians take it from Bible, and the other from Torah and other holy books. So, but, since atheism doesn't have such a manual book, then, where do your ethics come from? I think that's the underlying question here that, our friend is trying to ask.
Yes,
and
thank you. Yes,
it is mostly argued by most Muslim philosophers, but I think here is where we kind of start speaking about humanist values, and that we take our ethic code from being good without God. So and incest is just as Leslie explained, is for procreation reasons, is wrong, but also in the ethical sense, even though if there was no procreation, it's it's still equally against human psychological evolution, I believe.
It's also, I think, worth mentioning that if the religious texts are true, the entire human race is a product of incest.
Well, there you go.
Fair point.
That's
Fair
for
point.
sure.
Yeah.
Well, I was just reading us, the other day about this couple that, they'd been together and married for, I don't know, a few years, and they decided to check into, having a child. And along the way, they discovered that they were actually siblings, and they decided to stay married, but just not have kids, because, they built their lives around that. This is one of those cases where, they didn't know, obviously, in advance, right? I think probably most people that know their siblings probably would not do that, but like I
You would-
said, you know,
You would think they could adopt still too, couldn't they?
oh yeah, I don't see why not, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
I would
So
think that,
do I, you know, do I consider them immoral? No, I don't. I mean, they
Yeah.
didn't know, you know?
but I
Yeah.
would think the atheist perspective on morality is more about common sense. Just do what's right.
Don't be a
hurt
dick.
people.
Yeah.
Don't be a dick. Don't hurt people. Don't kill people. Don't, just be nice. What's wrong
Yeah.
with that?
Well,
Like, that's common sense.
it's not. I don't think there's an atheist morality kind of thing. I think there's a secular morality, and I think there's all kinds of those.
Well, I mean, on that point there, Tom, Penn Jillette
We
has
cannot hear you, Chris. Your mic may be unplugged.
I think Andrew is waiting patiently since a very long time.
I'm sorry.
I was just going
yes.
to say that there's like, based on that point about atheist and morality, Penn Jillette of Penn and Teller fame has a statement in one of his videos where he said, or maybe it's not his video, maybe it's something he wrote, but he said, religious people say, well, if you're not religious, then, why don't you just rape and murder everybody that you want to? And Penn Jillette says, well, I actually do. I actually do murder and rape everybody that I want to. And it turns out I don't want to rape and murder anybody.
Exactly. Yeah. It scares the shit out of me, frankly, when people say, oh, if I didn't believe in God, I would, have no control of this. Like, okay, stay the hell. Stay away from me. Don't go near my children.
Sometimes people do
If
bring
that's
this
what's keeping
up.
you,
Like that's exactly what I was going to get at. Like sometimes people look at it like, you just want to be good because you just want to be good. And then there's the, well, I want to be good because of God and things like this. And like, okay, well, that's fine. You're being good. Being good is good. But there's a difference between sort of being bragged into it or being given some sort of an incentive or just to be who you are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
You don't really ask for an after,
there-
reward in an afterlife, do we?
There's no contradiction between being good and religious because there
No.
are many people who are both. However, I don't believe that I don't believe anyone is good because they are religious. If you
No,
are
I
good
don't either,
because you are religious, then if you are a Christian or a Muslim who follows the scripture, then you believe that a woman who is raped must marry her rapist. If you are Jewish or Christian or Muslim, then any man who lies with a man as he lies with a woman has committed an abomination before the eyes of God and shall surely be put to death. Every major religion has in their scriptures things that are morally reprehensible. And because most Jews and Christians and Muslims and Hindus are good people, because they're good people, they ignore those parts of their scriptures that are morally reprehensible, and they pick and choose the parts of their scriptures that are actually pretty decent pieces of literature. And that's fine. Why? Because most people are good, and they are good because they are good people. They may be good people and religious, but they are not good because they are religious. If you actually followed the scriptures, you would not be a good person. And I don't care which scripture you happen to hold sacred. If you followed it diligently, you would be a bad person.
Exactly. I was going to say, it's the cherry pickers that, yeah, I kind of do. In
My
the sense that they
apologies,
justify the
but
whole, right? Okay. sorry.
Andrew has been waiting for a while. Andrew, go ahead.
You're muted.
I'll ask Andrew to unmute. Everybody can unmute themselves, but I think Andrew is no longer there.
Sorry,
So,
here I am.
Okay, here we go.
Okay, thanks very much. It seems to me that we can argue about, whether a particular religious belief, has the answer to moral quandaries, or whether some kind of secular, there's some kind of secular code that is somehow inherent in humanity. But I don't know, just looking at the recent political landscape, it's obvious that there are great divides in any society that will revolve around certain issues. And what people need appear to need is to be able to point to a higher, some kind of higher wisdom or higher power beyond today's politician, because today's politicians are reviled by at least half the population at any one time. So, you know, they pass laws, they try to influence social policy, but when it comes right down to it, whether you're applying religious philosophies, or in the United States, they've kind of deified, you know, the Constitution, and, you know, things have to be constitutional and all that. Is it possible to have a society that doesn't refer to some kind of higher order, other than kind of the secular policymakers of the day, to say what is right and wrong? And then, so if religion doesn't speak to that, atheism doesn't speak to that. Atheism, you know, simply says, well, we shouldn't turn to religions to answer questions. Where do we get these answers?
Literature, philosophy, art.
Yeah,
You know, there's all kinds of,
everybody's got their own set of background in terms of what they've read, and, you know, what parts of philosophy and religion or literature they find appealing. And you'll find massive divisions in the history of any thought.
Oh, for sure.
So
Yeah.
you know, I mean, yet we have to function as societies and set rules, you know, that everybody adheres to. And so historically, religions have laid down these rules, and that's why religions are so predominant, have been historically. And if you pull that out, it creates a vacuum. And I think there are certain modern, you know, kind of disaffections arising as a result of that vacuum. You know, a lot of the modern conflicts, I think, arise from the fact that there is a vacuum socially in terms of who says what's right and wrong.
I forget who said this, but the more science takes, so it's the God of the gaps argument, right? The more science takes over, the smaller those gaps become. And I think Sam Harrison, who talks about morality in terms of our understanding of, you know, science and that kind of thing, and this was touched on earlier. I think back.
Yeah, but the population has
reading,
to buy
but
in
Descartes, for
emotionally.
example, he did horrible experiments on dogs and stuff like that. It used to be an amusing thing for the whole town to go and watch cats lit on fire in a sack and hear them scream. We don't do that anymore because we know what suffering means, and we apply it. We don't have this mechanistic, you know, viewpoint of the world that animals are just, you know, stimulus response, right? We know they can suffer, and, you know, it just enhances our just on that one topic, right? Yeah, the more science answers, the smaller those gaps become.
Yeah, Christine, I think like for morality, a good place to start when you don't have scriptures and things like this is just sort of observation and what you know about our experience, right? So like if you punch someone in the face, you know that the outcome is bad, right? So you start to base it on things like this. What creates suffering and what creates thriving? And then you try to set up a system this way. Now, this is where everybody disagrees with everybody, and then you fight and stuff like this, but that's then politics. But you in theory can do this without scripture.
No, I totally agree.
Yeah.
Look at,
Ethan,
I don't know, Plato,
just had a comment.
Socrates, Aristotle, you know,
Sorry.
they were Christians. Yeah.
Here's a question I have out of curiosity to Eden, Leslie, and Christine. You all said, I mean, anybody who can answer. So let's say you are living in this 21st century, and you are only, you know, average age is 60 years. And, you know, the science, it grows, you know, you have experiments going on continuously, generations after generations. Let's say eventually the science concludes that there was a God, and the scripture was always right. You know, you're living in this 21st century, deciding on only half-baked, you know, the potato, and then you're actually making conclusions based on that.
So you're saying if there is evidence for a God, that, you know,
Yeah, if
yes,
science
I changed my
actually
mind.
know which one, but If there's proof,
Yeah,
and-
exactly. Yeah.
then absolutely.
I'm morally compelled to change my mind in the light of evidence, right? Yeah.
I'm saying that you're not at that conclusion yet. I'm saying that you're living in 21st century. After 3,000 years, let's say science concludes that there is a God out there. So then you actually living in this 21st century will be at a loss.
Well, yeah, but
Yeah, or you will be like, what does
I'm
Richard
sure
Dawkins
there's
say when he
lots to
was?
be discovered that we don't know, and we're at a loss at any point in history.
Well, okay, so here's my question then. So we find out that there's a God. Okay, so then what happens?
Yeah, do we change our behavior, or
Well, no, what does it mean then? Like, if it turns out that there's a God and science proves that there's a God,
yeah.
And you're asking me what my reaction to that is, well, I would definitely be surprised, but I wouldn't necessarily be unhappy. If I have to burn in a lake of fire for eternity, then I'm going to be unhappy. But if there just happens to be a God and all of this works out, I guess I'm okay with it. But one problem that I would definitely have with it is this. Children get horrible diseases, and I've now found out for sure that there's a person who's going out of their way to choose children to have horrible diseases. So I'm really pissed off about that.
And that person is who?
Well, okay, so I think we're okay. So here's a distinction, right? Between deism and theism, right? So theism is particularly pertaining to holy text, whereas deism is kind of the idea that there was a prime mover that set things in motion and was just hands off, doesn't care what you do, who you sleep with, just set things in motion. That's, I think that kind of a system isn't necessarily incompatible with atheism. It's pretty damn close, really,
Yeah, well, the question is, like, if we were to find out that there is a God, then the question is, though, does anybody know what the mind of God is? Because clearly in religious texts, there are people who think they don't just think there is a God. They know exactly what God thinks, and they put it down in print. If we find out there is a God, well, that would be some really mysterious entity. And it still wouldn't indicate that things that have been written down in books by mere mortals has anything to do with what this entity thinks or how it behaves.
Yeah. I don't know. There's all kinds of It's an interesting question, but
it is.
It's an eternal one, isn't it? Not going to answer that.
What I want to highlight is that I'm good. Right now I believe in God, and I'm good that even if I die, if there is no God, just hypothetically, having believed that I have a God does not hurt me at all. But you believing that there is no God, and then you found out after your death that there was a God, you are in a messy situation after.
No, people. There's been some really, horrible cases.
I agree to disagree.
Okay. Yeah.
Oh,
That's Pascal's wager for sure.
That's right. Yeah.
There have been people very much harmed by religion and their beliefs, or their families' beliefs, right?
You have in fact hurt yourself because you have lived your life according to lies. You have taken these rules that you have to live by, and according to God, you can't do this, and you can't eat pork, you can't eat bacon. You have to. Your sex life is affected because he wants to tell you with whom you can sleep and what positions are in, and you live your life according to the scripture. And if the scriptures are lies, you have lived your entire life following lies. Now, if you tell me that's not a problem, I don't know what is.
It is not a problem for me, because for me, when I read the scripture, it makes more sense to me. It's very practical and very logical to me. Also, I'm in a very, very better situation, by the way. I live in America. I live a very good life here. There are people suffering out there in third world country, which have much miserable situation out there. Okay. So I believe that God has gifted me all this, it's a blessing for me.
I only wish that your God was equally as generous to all of those people that you show that this much compassion to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It's a test. Life is test for everybody.
Yeah, it turns out you are more compassionate than your God. But
Yeah, you're better
well,
than your religion.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
well, I believe even though we have invested a good half of this talk dying, into the distinction between non-monogamy, polyamory, and polygamy, I think we still have managed to cover the Handmaid's Tale, and we have established to critique it to a level. And before we starting wrapping up, before I will ask Chris for her last comments and then thank her, I would like to do some commercials. So I would like to announce you guys the next major event of Center for Inquiry Canada in 2021. We have an annual event called Protecting Blasphemers. Protecting Blasphemers is an annual panel discussion highlighting the most recent blasphemy issues of the year. We aim to discover the areas where the global secular community needs to do progress in terms of building support mechanisms to protect blasphemers running from persecution all around the world. This year's, every year, Protecting Blasphemers is in loving memory of a fellow activist. In 2019, the first Protecting Blasphemers event was in loving memory of Andy Mulcahy, who is the co-founder of Center for Inquiry Victoria branch. And this was the 2019 event where Gail Miller, president of AAI, Armin Navabi, founder of Atheist Republic, myself, and Robert Light, president of Victoria Secular Humanist Association, has attended. In 2020, the Protecting Blasphemers 2 took place, and it was in the loving memory of a fellow director of Center for Inquiry Victoria branch who passed away, Ronald Tomlinson. And we had 13 speakers, all, I believe, starring atheist activists. And Christine was also one of the speakers, as you can see, in last year's Protecting Blasphemers event. So this year's major event, Protecting Blasphemers, is going to be taking place on December the 14th, Tuesday. We will start announcing the event within the next week. And that's when you will find out about the speakers of this year's talks. But I can give you a little hint. This year, it's only presidents of Canadian, American, and international atheist secular humanist organizations. So it's going to be another star shower. So, with this, I think.
Owner, can I just add, both of the Protecting Blasphemers events that we've had have been just fantastic. So I highly recommend you guys come out for them.
Me too.
Just wanted to add that. This has been great discussions. Really, really good stuff.
Thank you. And I hope this year's is going to be equally good. So yeah, before I thank Chris for this enlightening and entertaining presentation, I would like to ask for her final comments and perhaps a few last words before we conclude this talk.
Well, I know we kind of went off the rails, but I mean, that is the point of that book, is to, introduce some really good topics for discussion and for argument and that kind of thing. And I'll wrap up by saying thank you so much for showing up, and thank you for CFI Canada for, allowing me to speak about this topic. And yeah, thank you. I had a great time. I hope everybody else did too.
Thank you so much, ma'am. This is Nurul. I want to apologize if I offended anybody. That was not my intention, but I just expressed myself. Thank you.
No.
And I didn't mean to offend either, but it's just open, honest conversation. And if we take offense, that becomes a problem. If we just agree to disagree, then it's not a problem, right?
Yeah,
I appreciate your insights.
Sure.
And
Thank you.
I'll add to that and just say you helped add to the conversation that we had. So thank you for your.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and this is Center for Inquiry, so you need to, you get to speak
It's-
your mind.
it's-
You need to ask your questions freely.
And
Yeah,
I think we all have ideas about, being offended and how that, relates to blasphemy and,
Yes.
I am not offended. Yeah, not at all.
Thank you very much. And as I mentioned at the beginning, we are Canada's only national nonprofit for science and free thought. We hope that those of you who are not already members will consider purchasing a membership. We will include a link to our membership page and the volunteer page in the chat window, and I've already shared it a few times. And you can also find those links through our meetup ads. I hope that you will consider joining. Not only does your membership provide financial support to CFIC, it also adds your voice to that of others who support science, critical thinking, and secularism. As we grow in numbers, so does our influence with government decision makers and the public opinion that guides them. We advocate for evidence-based decisions on government policy, healthcare, public education, and human rights. If concerns like climate change, blasphemy law, education curriculum, medical pseudoscience are important to you, please become a CFIC member. In today's landscape, there are too many people spreading misinformation and trying to mislead you. Without us, the major influencers will continue to be the large self-interested groups and institutions that benefit from making baseless claims and spreading pseudoscientific nonsense. So please consider membership. It's only $30 per year. Finally, a big thanks to the CFIC volunteers. If you would like to volunteer for CFIC, you can sign up on our website. There are many interesting positions for you to choose from. Now, everybody can unmute your microphones, and let's give Chris a big round of applause.
Thank you. And to you guys too. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you very much,
Thanks.
Christine.
Thank you,
you.
and
Thank you all.
have a great night, everyone. So take care until next time.